I got off of work and had just attended a board meeting and decided, you know what sounds really good after all that? Life lessons with Uramichi Oniisan. What better way to balance out having to perform adulthood than watching a show with a 30 something that is also having to perform joy during adulthood as well? Man, it's Romania Black, and we're on episode 3 of Life Lessons with Uramichi Oniisan. My dog's being wonderful as always. And yeah, this series so far is 1, hilarious, 2, very on the nose. With its millennial humor and hitting all of the right spots of talking about how much it can be frustrating to be an adult, but also it makes you want to be friends with these characters because in a way Uramichi and Usao and Kurosao and Iteru and Utano, like you instantly relate to them and their struggles with adulthood, and you want to be friends with them and be like, no, let's be friends and hang out, it'll be better, I promise. And it's just so trying to watch them like suffer at the hands of this mediocre job at a kids TV studio as they're put through the ringer, made to do all of these ridiculous things. So I very much feel sorry for them, and I want to like extend my hand to them and be like, it'll be okay. But so far we haven't really touched base on Uramichi's background as a gymnast. We know that Usuro, and Kunara, the two that are practically dating, that are his kohai, and their names escape me horribly. I will promise I'll try to get them right in this episode. But the two of them were from the same college as him. They had the same major, and they followed him to this job. So clearly their prospects in sports fitness or whatever weren't as promising. So here they are playing a bear and a rabbit while he plays the fitness instructor at this kids show. I'm surprised they didn't do like a Tiger and Bunny but then I'm like, Tiger Bunny is a series, so I wonder if that was too close for copyright. So like, we'll just do a rabbit and a bear. That's close enough. It would seem like it might be too on the nose if they did Tiger and Bunny, maybe. Possibly. We'll have to see. That could be the case, but I thought that was interesting. Anyway, and then Iteru, bless his heart, he's hot, he can sing, but he's dumb as a box of rocks. But he has a sweet borzoi, bless him. And then I'm most curious at this point, not only about, I think the two I'm most curious about, because I feel like Iteru is pretty straightforward. He's kind of dumb, but he has a good heart. He could have a good girlfriend or boyfriend, but he's just kind of dense. The two friends that are the kohai, they're all right. I like them. But I'm most intrigued about Uramichi and his gymnast background and why he's disillusioned from his dreams. He kind of reminds me a little bit of Eiji from Banana Fish a little bit. If you know Banana Fish, his backstory seems maybe a little bit reminiscent to Eiji. He just hasn't found his Ash Lynx, apparently. He needs to go to America for a while. Go to NYC. And then there's also Utano, who is the female singer. She's so talented and so pretty. And I'm like, why you settling for this TV gig? I want to know her background, why she's with this comedian for 5 years, what's going on there, why aren't they engaged, what's going on, what's their story. I want to know about her story and Uramichi. They're the two that I am most intrigued by at this point. But this show is exactly my type of humor. And it's so dry, but it's just so bizarre at times. I'm like, yes, this is what I want. This is all the comedy that I need. And I find myself wanting to watch ahead because I'm trying to record ahead anyway for scheduling this summer, but I want to watch ahead because I really like this show and it's so much fun to watch. So there we are. In any case, I'm really excited to see what happens this episode. I hope you all are too, but I got done with the board meeting, like I said, this evening, and I was like, what am I going to do? And I was like, do I have time? I could watch something. And I was like, I'm going to watch Uramichi-san. That's what I'm going to watch. So there we are. But we're not going to waste any more time. We are going to dive right into life lessons with Uramichi Oniisan, and we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1. And let's do it. Dang, It's all fun and good. It's all well and good. And it's all fun and games until you realize just exactly how depressed Uramichi is. Oh my gosh. Oh, there are parts of this episode that just broke my heart. I was like, ooh, this is getting a little too real. Like, there's still a lot of humor in this series, don't get me wrong, and it's hilarious. But there's other parts of this episode I was like, ooh, this is getting into some real territory of him being depressed, him not really knowing what to do with his life, him feeling like he's a failure. And I was like, oh. And I think that if you've never had a point in your life where you felt like you failed at something, or you felt lonely, or you felt like you weren't going to be successful, or you've questioned your purpose, if you've never had a point like that in your life, congratulations. You're doing great, sweetie. Keep it up. I don't wish that on anybody, but I think, there's been tons of times where things I'm like, what do you do? And what do you do? Because I think for others though, it depends on who you are with how you adjust, right? Because take Eteru, for example. Eteru doesn't seem to be bothered by his job. He doesn't like it. I mean, he's not bursting with positivity all the time, but he's just kind of it's fine. It's what it is. And he has his dog. But the thing is, he has his dog. His dog keeps him grounded and happy, whereas Uramichi doesn't even have that. So I think that's I think that one shows if I have 2 dogs in my house to keep me company, and I definitely know if I didn't have my 2 dogs, I would be really lonely. So I do think having a pet or a companion, whether it's human or an animal, is something that really does help your mental health a lot, right? Because we know that Utano has her boyfriend, which we don't know the full story with their situation. So I'm assuming we're going to find that out at some point in this season, maybe. We know Eteru has his dog, and he loves Sayuri-chan. Sayuri-chan is his favorite, which fair. I think that having Sayuri helps his mental health a lot. I don't know if Utano's boyfriend's helping her mental health, but we'll probably talk about that eventually. And then I know that the one, Kumao, he has a cat, so that helps him as well. And then Usao is just, man, dig himself a grave, because everything he was doing in this episode, I'm like, you're not helping your cause at all. But Uramichi, I feel like Usao at least is pretty outgoing and has his intense friendship with Kumao that helps as well. But Uramichi doesn't really seem to have a lot of friends except for his 2 kohai who bug him half the time. And besides that, he doesn't really have any pets or any purpose. So he seems very depressed, and it's so sad. You just want to give him the biggest hug because you're like, dude, it doesn't necessarily have to be that way, but it's easier said than done. It's harder than it looks, right? So let's talk about him in his apartment. The first thing is he notices that he's out of soap. And he's like, I'm almost out. He's like, I need to stop by the drugstore if I remember. And honestly, I can relate to that as well. I feel like as adults, one of the biggest problems is that we get so busy and we get so caught up in everyday life that sometimes we forget the small things, or we forget order or organization. I know for me, if I don't write it down, I have a planner. You all can't see it. It's off here to the side. If I don't write down in my planner, to do a specific task or something, I will often forget about it because you get caught up in other things and it doesn't have precedence or importance. I think that it's also kind of symbolic that Uramichi, the fact that he's like, well, if I remember, I'll go get soap. That just shows that he doesn't place much importance on his self-care, because he's like, well, if I remember, I'll go get it. But that's just the point. He doesn't have self-care as a priority. It's just on a need-to-know basis, I'll get it if it happens. And I'm like, no, you have to prioritize that. And I feel like unless you are dedicated to your self-care and your well-being, you're not going to prioritize that. And that's where people kind of fall off the wagon, right? We'll talk about his other things too going on here. Also, it was really clever that the episode started out with soap that he was forgetting when this whole episode is about wash your hands and gargle. I was like, ah! So I wanted to look this up real quick about Japanese hygiene, if this was a thing, and gargling, if they do this all the time. So schools in Japan teach students that gargling and hand washing are important habits for preventing colds. Oh, so gargling, putting water in your mouth and washing out your throat, removing germs and dirt. Okay, That's really, it says it's common hygiene ritual in Japan that is believed to prevent upper respiratory tract infections, or URTIs, is gargling, or ugai, in Japan. Huh. I've never heard of that as like a common practice. Our family's tradition is if you start to get a sore throat, then you gargle salt water, and the salt water, the salt will like clear, like will basically kill the bacteria. Interesting. Now I kind of want to gargle salt water. Now I just want to gargle water all the time. Be like, oh, is that something that will help? Really? Okay. Now I just want to do that on a daily basis because maybe it'll help. Interesting. Didn't know that though. So that's relatively good to know. How about that? So I think that's interesting. And then we have him going in to the station saying, okay, we're going to use these balls and everything, and I'm going to show you this costume design. And Uramichi instantly hates it. He is instantly like, this is the worst thing I've ever seen. Why would you do this to us? No. I like that Iteru doesn't really seem to have much of a reaction to it. He's just like, oh, okay. But Utano thinks it's the most hilarious thing ever. And I just love that Usao just gets constantly just elbowed and punched. But anyway, so Uramichi's saying, I'll do it to stay alive. And Iteru is like, Iteru hears him say that. He says, I'll do it to stay alive. And Iteru's like, well, he rationalized that in such an extreme way. And then we go to the intro. Here's the thing. First of all, after this episode, I really want to ship Iteru and Uramichi. I like already have them down as a ship. I want to ship them together. We'll talk about it in the episode. As we get through this episode, we'll talk about it. But I really want to ship them. But also I want to talk about the idea of I'll do it to stay alive. And Uramichi's motivation here and his mindset. I know some people think that it's not realistic, but here's the thing. I am a speech coach. And so I have students on my team that I co-coach with two other individuals. And they're all between the ages of like 18 and 19. So they're not in their 30s like Uramichi. But there was one on the team that he works at this really terrible place. And he finally put in his 2 weeks and got away from there. And I was like, oh, thank goodness. I hope he's away. We're on summer vacation now, so I don't know. But they put in their 2 weeks. But they worked there all last year. And they complained about that job all the time. And the stories they told about that job, it sounded like hell. It sounded like it was a fast food restaurant. It sounded like the worst conditions, the worst people coming through. It sounded like they had an awful time. And I told them one day, I said, why do you work there? Because there's lots of jobs elsewhere in the fast food industry. Even if you can't find a better job, you could at least go to a different restaurant and try to work there. This one just sounds like a really bad restaurant. And he told me, he goes, yeah, I could quit, but what if the next place I go to is worse? And I went, I was like, oh no! I was just like, I'm usually very optimistic. And I was like, oh, that's such a terrible like way to think about it. But I mean, I guess that's a possibility. And I was like, oh no. But it's that mindset. He kind of like, he's like Uramichi. He's like, well, but what if it's not any better? What if where I go next is worse? And I'm like, well, you can't think like that. You got to think that maybe it'll be better. You don't know till you try. But in that moment, I was like, oh crap. I hadn't thought about it in that mindset. And that's exactly what Uramichi is like here. He's like, this is sustainable. Maybe. I don't know where else to go. I don't see any other job prospects. I might as well stay here and just ride it out because I don't know what else to do. And I'm like, ugh. And that's really depressing. I feel this show, as we're getting more into it, because now we're a couple episodes in, we're starting to get past just the veneer of it being hilarious, because it is, and starting to get into these characters. And it very much is talking about how how terrifying, as well as how just depressing adult life can be, and how easily people can spiral mentally, and that there's just not a real focus about mental well-being in adulthood in the job industry. And it's like, ugh, you either have things the way society dictates it, whether you have the girlfriend, the house, the family, and the job. And if you don't have all of those, then you're not considered to be living a life fulfilled. That's like the guy in the infomercial at the very end. She's like, draw this out. This is what this means. And I've actually had that test done before where it tells you like what it says about you symbolically. And it's basically what it says. Although I do think that Uramichi's dog looked like a dog. It looked like Zero from Nightmare Before Christmas. It looked like a dog. Let's be real. But I do think the house thing, the fact that he draws them separate, like he's not thinking about a relationship or he doesn't see it as a possibility. That's kind of why I want him and Iteru to kind of form a relationship, because I'm like, I feel like Iteru like lets everything slide off of him. He's got Sayuri-chan. He's not very bothered by not having this family or this other lifestyle. He just kind of takes things as they come and seems pretty nonchalant. Whereas Uramichi seems to overanalyze every little thing. And I feel like they're both so opposite that they could like help each other. Not that Iteru needs a lot of help, but they could help each other through their friendship. If anything, through their friendship, right? So getting past this episode, all the kids, I really like Utano's like outfit, her like shirt and skirt. I would totally wear that. And then of course she's like, oh, my stomach hurts. Utano's a really good actress. Like her coming out in this episode and acting like for the kids, she does it in a very, again, she's super talented. She does it in a very believable way as an actress where she's like, oh no, kids, what do we do? And it doesn't seem forced. She like knows her lines. She comes out and does her job. She does a really good job. She clearly is overqualified for this kid's show position. And so that's why I want to know more about her. Meanwhile, Kumo and Usao, like they're just a bunch of idiots. So of course this makes sense. I like how also the kids, they know when they mess up, and they also are picking up on things that are happening on set, like Usao stubbing his toe, the fact that Iteru keeps wanting to call himself the bacteria, and Uramichi keeps wanting to call himself the Germinator, because they almost seem like they wanted each other's roles. And the kids notice that. They may not understand all the complexities and nuance of society, but children are not dumb. They are observant little mother truckers, and they will point out the moment you do something wrong, and it will be blunt, and it will be brutal, and it will be earth-shattering. Like, they will tell you. My middle school instructor taught us how to draw like the number 7, but in middle school he had a very distinct way of doing it. You drew like a 7, but to distinguish it from a 1, you drew a line in the middle of it. So it was like cutting the 7 in half. And that was how he drew 7s. And that way he was like, when I grade your papers, I'll know if it's a 7 or a 1. And we're like, oh, that's really cool. So I've always drawn my 7s with a line through the middle of it, like it's cutting it in half. I remember I substitute taught one day, and one boy stood up and said, "You are wrong." I was like, but this was how I was taught by my instructor. And he goes, well, that's incorrect. And I went, you're 9. I was like, sit down, Trevor. You don't know. You don't know me. But it was like a gut punch, because he was like, why aren't you doing this correct? And I was like, I'm just trying to substitute teach and make $75 for the day. It's brutal. And it's like, they're not even trying to be mean necessarily. They just call it like they see it. And kindergartners are the worst, because it's like innocent chaos, but kindergartners are so observant, and they don't mean to be mean. They haven't learned that yet. So they just point stuff out, and you're just like, and everything Uramichi goes through with these kids, I'm like, I know that feeling. But she's like, but who could we call out? And the Germinator. The thing about it is, like, Utano thinks that outfit is hilarious. And I like that he gets into character. He's from a theater group, he says. He's done theater in the past. And he just is like, well, I get into character, and that's what I do. Seems kind of, like, oblivious to it otherwise. But then the little devil ears that Uramichi wears and the glasses. Bacterian. Oh, my God. Hilarious. I don't know. It also helps that I feel like, because you have, oh my God, you have Uramichi as the villain, and you have Iteru as the hero. You have that hero and villain motif that helps that whole enemies to lovers thing. I'm also just now realizing that there is a giant B on Uramichi's superhero outfit. There's a giant J. They spelled the Germinator with a J instead of a G. And you may be asking yourself, why would they do that? Why would they deliberately put a J instead of a G on Germinator? One, probably for copyright, because I'm sure there's a Germinator somewhere with a G. But also, if you rearrange the shot and you put Uramichi over here and you put Tara over there, Then their initials on their superhero and supervillain costumes spell BJ. Which, all I will say to that is that they've been making dick jokes the last, I don't know how many episodes. And so you have their literal superhero villain initials spell blowjob. So this is not helping my case. This is not helping the case against them being a ship. They are so a ship. I am like 1000% here for it. I love all of this. This is amazing. I can't get over the fact that they have BJ on their uniforms. Oh my god. So then the fact that Eteru throws the ball as hard as he can, it's like, yes. And he doesn't really realize, he's like, I'm just in character. And then the fact that they made all the little kids throw the ball. And then Usao is like, yeah. He's like, it's okay to throw it. I'm throwing it as hard as you can, really hard. And then he looks over, and Uramichi's looking back at him like, bitch, what are you doing? I think my favorite part of this series so far is Usao not knowing when to stop and digging his own grave, and Uramichi being like, bitch, what are you doing? And like, just, it's so good. It's so funny. And they just knock the shit out of him with those balls. So then afterwards, they're like, oh, the bacteria's gone. Everything's great. And then I like that Eteru goes to apologize to him. He's like, oh, I'm so sorry, Uramichi. And meanwhile, he's like just covered in bruises and scrapes. He's like, it's a kid's show. You didn't have to go full power. And he's like, you should knock first. And he's like, well, I'm sorry. It's a habit from the time I was in the theater group. Whenever I get into character, I can't hold back. And I'm like, I feel like Miyano Mamoru had so much fun playing him. Because it's like, yeah, he's just a big theater geek that's playing this character that can sing and do all this and be dramatic. Yes, of course. I also like the idea of Miyano Mamoru and Kamiya being in the same role together side by side, because in Bungo Stray Dogs, Mamoru plays Dazai and Kamiya plays Rampo, so they're used to being on screen together, except their characters are polar opposite than they are in Bungo Stray Dogs. It's great. He's like, that's a character you can get into. I just like, there's so many moments here where we see Uramichi with all the marks and everything. He's like, I hope this isn't a popular segment because I don't want to have to keep getting pelted with balls. We'll just look like two weirdos playing with balls. And I'm like, y'all keep making dick jokes in this show. And I mean, you could be playing with each other's balls. I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop right there. I'm going to get out of the gutter. I want to ship them so much after this episode. I want to ship them hardcore. So then I really like that Kumao is always serious. He's just like watching Usao dig his grave, and he's like, dude, you're my friend, but like, what are you doing, man? And Usao's just like, dee, gonna go find the shovel and dig my grave even further. It's like, what are you doing? And then, yeah, like he turns the corner saying that funny guys are gonna be more popular than gym rats. And Uramichi's like, are you sure? And the moment he runs straight into that sign, hilarious. Just ridiculous. The thing about it is, I like that Uramichi noticed that Usao was the one who came up with the nickname Polka Dot Oniisan. He's like, it's not funny. And the fact that Eteru was saying it, he knows Eteru didn't make it up because Eteru's kind of an airhead. He's like, he didn't make it up. He heard it from you. And Usao's like, how did he know? And it's like, because you're the only one that antagonizes him. So Uramichi's like, why are we teaching kids this way? There's probably simpler ways to teach them. And that's when he remembers the hand soap and goes into the drugstore to get that and some compresses. Because he thinks that he'll need them. So then we have the women come to the door. This next segment is where it took a turn for the depressing. Because these two women come up like, being like, hello, can we tell you about our Lord and Savior? And I feel like it's interesting to note that Eteru does believe in a god and does have faith and seems like he's in a decent place, but Uramichi's like, I don't believe or have any faith. And they're like, do you have any regrets or anxieties that you felt in your life? And he's like, yes, all the time. And they're like, well, you know, your faith could help you with that. And he's like, if you believe in God, it's going to help you. And he's like, well, what does he say there? They're like, I'm sure he'll help you if you believe in God. And he's like, when I can't even believe in myself. That line was too real. That was too real. And at that moment, I was like, oh, we need to dial this back because his depression is at that level, right? He's like, I work at a place where a job is children's trust being essential. And he does a speech about children's trust. It's so good. And we're going to talk about it. But yeah, the thing that gets me is that he has a sequence that comes up next. And this part is like, before I go to bed, I'm not confident that I can get up the following morning. I was like, oh shit, this is depressing. And this is not good. And I like that everything kind of twitches a little bit behind the screen. We kind of get things from his perspective. When a bus that goes somewhere other than my work stops in front of me, I sometimes have a strong impulse to get on it for some reason. And then we see him like imagining himself outside rather than inside the studio. And he's like, when I try foods that I remember tasting good in the past, and it like twitches on his face and it sees him like crying instead of like his face like smiling to the kids and giving like a little wink. He's like, the food that tasted good in the past no longer has like a good taste anymore. I mean, that's a sign of depression. You should probably get that checked out. That's not good. Even the kanji slips my mind and I can't write them. And then he sees the cameramen as robots. I should know better than anyone else in the world, and yet I can't trust myself. I don't have the capacity to believe in someone else at all. And that's so sad. Like at that moment, I was like, oh, I want Uramichi to make a friend. I want him to get a friend. Even if him and Ateru are just like platonic besties, I want him and somebody to become friends. And not Usao, because Usao's like kind of an instigator and kind of aggravates him. I need him to find a friend that he can like, him and Ateru and Sayuri-chan. They need to like go on walks together, like go hang out, do something. Like I want to give Uramichi a hug and like help him conquer his depression. He's like, okay, gather around, kids. And so then Usao told the kids that he can do anything. And I like that Kamu's like, you're on your own, dude. Why'd you say that to them? And so I love the look that Uramichi gives him. Like, bitch, what did you do? Why'd you tell these kids I can do anything? What's wrong with you? And I love that you have like, Kumao has a smile on his face with the bear costume looking so ridiculous when in real life he's like, always scowling. But yeah, so the girls ask him to draw characters from the show that he has no clue about. And at that point, I'd be like, and I know exactly what he's talking about. And I know exactly this scenario because I, in substitute teaching, have had kids like at the grade school level specifically be like, can you draw this? Can you draw that? And there's been a lot of requests they've made because I do like doodling. I like drawing. And so I would sometimes do it on the board, like the whiteboard, to like help make them like trust me more. I'd be like, look, I'm a cool teacher. I can draw these. And they'd be like, oh my gosh. But if they asked me to draw something I couldn't draw, then it was over. Then they were like, well, that doesn't look right. And I was like, I would usually try, if they requested something, I'd try to deflect it and be like, but what about this? And it usually worked out where they'd get distracted. And then I'd start drawing it before they could have a chance to say no. And then they'd be like, oh, and then they'd lose their train of thought. But I understand exactly what he's talking about when he's talking about living up to expectations. And the creepy, like the girls with the six packs and the short skirts and the abs. And they're like, what is this? I love that they say they're appalled. They're like, faith, trust, no matter how much time and effort it takes to gain them, it only takes a second to lose them. And they're like, so you can't do anything. What a dagger to the heart, right? What a dagger to his heart. And once you lose them, it's hard to get them back. Yeah. Kids are very simple in that if you betray their trust, they ain't gonna trust you no more. So you gotta walk a fine line. And it's like, man, I felt so much for Uramichi then. So then though, like a knight in shining armor, right? Where he's like, leave the rest to me. Like Iteru shows up and I'm like, at this point, I wanted to ship them together because I was like, oh, this is exactly what you need, Uramichi. You need a friend like Iteru who can help you when you're in trouble. But Iteru also strikes me as the type of person who instantly is just naturally good at things. And there's like, why can you draw them? And he's like, I did an image search for them earlier. Like, he's like, I did what you should have done. I got on Google and looked them up. So he's not totally dumb. He's not totally an airhead. He figured out what to do, which was smart. But then this line here, he's like, I like your drawing better than mine. I was like, that is a flirty line. That is, you know, him being nice. And I'm saying flirty because I want to ship them. But if you want to take it as he's just being nice, still, he's being nice to you, Uramichi. Become friends with Ateru. He's being nice. Latch on to that. He's like, I like your drawing better than mine. I'm like, oh yes, that's so sweet. Take advantage of that. And Uramichi's just like, well, I didn't want to draw in the first place. He's like, that guy's potential is unlimited. And I feel like Uramichi, I don't know if he feels jealous of Ateru, but he feels kind of hopeless around him because everything Ateru does seems to work out. Whereas in his situation, that's not the case. But yeah, Usao, like, dude, you dug your own grave. And he's like, I told if I believed in God. It's faster if I deal things with myself, right? Oh my God. Meanwhile, they do like a little test of the preview. And they're like, this is sudden, but which do you prefer? To go home late or to get up early in the morning? Before I heard about what he had to do, I would have said stay up late and work there late. Because usually it's like, oh, you just have to work on some scenes or something. You stay a couple extra hours and you get stuff done. Then you don't have to get up early in the morning. After we find out that he has to draw on all of these bouncy balls, I'd been like, no, never mind. I want to get up early in the morning because then that'll give me a time crunch and I can get it done before the show starts. I'd rather do that now that I think about it. That was also such a bitch move because, like, the director should know, why would you let somebody do that? That's awful. And he ended up staying there overnight. That's so bad. It seems like Usao's not paying attention too, but Kamo is to what's going on. Like Kamo seems to be understanding that Uramichi's in a bad place or maybe getting, like, mishandled by the higher ups. And Usao doesn't seem to notice, but I'm wondering if Kamo will actually speak up about it. I don't know. But they like his drawings. And then Uramichi has this moment where he has this humanity where he's like, well, shouldn't we pay attention to the kids' opinions? But then you find out it's not for the kids. It's for him as the villain. The creepy drawings work because he's the villain. It's not supposed to be something the kids like. It's supposed to be something they don't like. So it's like, damn. It's like taking Uramichi's skills and saying that they're awful. So this is how we're going to use them. Ugh. But yeah, him saying that he just wonders why he's doing this. No matter what I'm doing, there are times I suddenly wonder things like, what am I doing? Is this what I should be doing right now? And then it just shows him kind of just disillusioned on the floor, just sitting everywhere. Ugh. I feel so bad for him. Like, this little sequence of shots where it shows him, like, randomly in the floor in different places is just like an existential crisis happening. It's like, do you want to see what an existential crisis looks like? Here is Uramichi going through one with these squishy balls right now. It's terrifying, and I feel so bad for him. Ugh. He's like, I feel guilty about what I'm doing to myself when I'm here doing it. But I don't know how to make meaningful use of my time. And I don't know how to live anymore. It's so sad. Because I'm like, I feel like at some point we've all had that moment of not knowing what to do and feeling disillusioned. But it, like, makes me want to help him figure out what to do and to get better and, like, get him some help mentally. Like, I want to help him so badly. I'm like, oh, I just feel for him. I'm like, come on, Uramichi, don't give up. Don't give up yet. I don't want this time to end up being wasted. And yeah, and then we'll talk about that whole, like, doing what you like and enjoying what you do. We'll talk about that later. But I like that immediately Usao's like, well, good morning. And Kumao's like, you should be chipper. Uramichi stayed here all night working on stuff. And he's like, I'm still alive. I forgot that I can't sleep much without sleeping pills or booze. It made me so sad that he feels like he can't go to sleep unless he drinks or takes sleeping pills. Again, I want to give Uramichi the biggest hug and help him work through his adult life crises. Right? Meanwhile, again, I also feel like Kamau is constantly observing him and is going to make a statement or have an intervention or something at some point. We just haven't reached that time yet, or at least I hope that's the case. Meanwhile, we have the Bacterian versus Germinator again. And they all like, I like that Usao as the rabbit says Nippon, like, or Pion, like the hop sound occasionally. And then, yeah, out comes Iteru as our hero and Bacterian. I just love the setup of Uramichi versus Iteru, and I want them to become friends. I feel like that's so good. And then, yeah, the little faces. Kadro. And they just face each other. I also like that the sticky balls kind of like get on him, and it's really gross, and they have to reshoot the segment because it looked like it made it look to where Uramichi won. And they try to do like the life lessons being like, well, sometimes kids, you don't always win. And I was like, but should kids really have this existential moment, or are they going to reshoot the segment? And they reshoot the segment. Yep. So then we have the after credits, which are horrifically depressing. And we see Uramichi. Here's the thing. Uramichi hasn't given up. He's still trying because he's still working out. He's still working out. He's not making great health decisions. He's smoking and drinking, which isn't good if he's trying to be athletic. It's a little detrimental to his health, but he's trying. But he is doing his best to stay in shape, which seems to be like the one thing that allows him to keep it together, is that he maintains his physique, or that he's doing that out of habit. Because it does. What's so crazy is that like he has this serotonin from exercising, but then he has the smoking and the booze. So it's like all these hormones and stuff are just like counteracting this chemical imbalance. And then he talks about, he has the drawing there. And then we see like the commercial for the Kira Puree. And she's like, I'm Pure Pink, the princess who fights evil. The villain this week is a college man who thinks he's a fashion leader, even though he's not. My favorite line, though, out of that commercial is this, like, he recommends an affiliate internet business to his female kohai. And you see him looking with the butterfly wings. I love it where it says, the patronizing air he puts on is way harder to deal with than a giant typhoon. I would watch that show. I'd watch that show in a heartbeat. Yes, please. Love it. And then they do the commercial here. The Kira Pure Aggressive airs on Sundays at 8 in the morning. And so then Uramichi says the proverb, what one likes, one will do well. And so he says, I think that's very true. I never really wished to be good at drawing. And he says, it's just that my feelings of not wanting to draw show up in the expressions of the things that I draw. So that's interesting. So he's like, if you like it, you're going to do well at it. And he's like, well, I don't really like drawing. So when I draw it, you can tell I don't like it because it comes across that I'm not satisfied with it. But it seems like maybe he wants to do something with it. So I want to know more about what he'll do with the drawing and what he's done with gymnastics in the past. He's like, it feels unbearable. And so then there's the originally when it said psychological test, I thought that it was an advertisement for like one of those art academies. Do you remember they have like if you can draw this on the piece of paper, you can submit it to go to this art academy. I always wanted to do that when I was a kid. Obviously I never did that, but I thought those ads were so cool. So I thought that was going to be. I don't know why they have this ad, this psychological test, what they're advertising, because this guy was pretty brutal. Like he was just like, well, if you don't do this certain drawing a certain way, it means that you're a failure at life. Don't know what to tell you. I was like, what are you advertising? Are you advertising for therapy? I don't know if that's the best way to go about it. And we see like the people that he drew, the man and the woman. Yeah, they're apart and the house is small and the dog is there, but it looks like a dog. I do like the emojis or the icons that represent Kumai and as well as Usao, because he goes to text them. He's like, ask your friends if they can tell if it's a dog or not, and it shows you have personality issues or not. And so he like takes the picture and he goes to the text. And what does the text say? When he goes up there to text them, it says, I'll check it the next time I go back. More importantly, would you like to go out for a drink now? So the emoji or the avatar for Kumai is a fish in grayscale, which seems match his personality. And then the one for Usao is the lucky, like, pachinko, like, rainbow. They're like two polar opposite avatars, but they represent both of them. And so then Uramichi's, when he sends it, oh, we don't see his avatar. He's like, I hate to tell you this, but what does this look like to you? He's like, you're disappointing as a person if they can't tell. And so he goes out to smoke, and then his phone goes off, and he goes back in to check it. And they're like, oh, like, is it a mole or a chupacabra? It's a dog. Ah. This show, I like that, one, the show is still hilarious. Like, it's so funny. Some of the expressions, some of the jokes in it are so funny. But then there are other moments where it gets real, and you suddenly realize just how depressed and sad Uramichi is, and you're like, oh no. And you just want to help him feel better. So I know the manga is ongoing. I don't know what else we're going to get out of this season, but I hope that things at least get better for him. But I know things are going to get worse before they get better. So I don't know. I'm curious to see what we get. So anyway, I'm excited to hear your thoughts down below, but I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back next week with more of Life Lessons with Uramichi Oniisan. Bye!